Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another amazing edition of the Best Practices Show. I got a great one for you today. We have the Director of Education, Miranda Beeson. She's an awesome coach and one of the leaders around here. And today we talk about the 3 metrics to measure new patient success. It is powerful. If you can understand why these are important and you start to measure them, they can change your practice in an amazing way. So make sure you listen to this. I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another amazing edition of the Best Practices Show. Guess what we do here? We bring in the best thinkers, teachers, coaches everywhere, and I got a special edition for you. We got Miranda Beeson in the house. Welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be in the actual house today.
You're in the house. And what you guys may or may not know is Miranda is an incredible leader here. She's part of our leadership team, and she is also the Director of Education. So we sit up when she shows up, you know, so she's in the house. And wait, you got to tell us, what are all these people? If you're watching the video of this, you can see we're in our training center and something's going on tomorrow. What's going on tomorrow?
I'm so excited. Tomorrow is the administrators program, dental administrators program, Beyond the Front Desk. So we're going to have a room full of clients and dental administrators learning a little bit about the systems and how to elevate the patient experience from the administrative side.
Okay, tell me what's really going to happen. If I'm a dentist listening and I send my administrative team member here, what can they expect?
They can expect to leave feeling empowered, feeling like they're a valuable part of the team, and that they have an impact in creating a patient experience that's next level.
Love it.
You know, the clients that we work with are looking to provide a different experience for their patients, especially if they're trying to differentiate themselves. They're trying to bring patients in who are discerningly choosing to be with them. And we have to make a really unique experience in order for that to be successful. So we're going to learn about, yes, the systems that the administrative team implements on a daily basis, but how do we do that in a way that helps us to set ourselves apart?
I love it. And you're a pretty humble person, but I'll tell you, if you're in the room with Miranda, she's not only going to tell you what to do, but she's going to get you to think. Like, I use her stuff all the time. I was telling you, I spoke to a study club on Tuesday, and I was like, I got a question, and it was a difficult one. And I'm like, I'm just going to go off on what Miranda taught me about, cancellation. So it's fun. And I would encourage you guys, if you haven't had a chance to experience it, please do. You will not be disappointed. So good
and we're going to have another one in the fall. So if you didn't get a chance to make this one, you can always come back in. And the really cool thing I love about every time we're in this room is how much we learn from each other. I learn from the participants as well. So it's a very collaborative environment. It
is. And it's really cool because people share their secrets and you're like, that's really good. One of the challenges is just learning how to think differently. And it's too hard to figure out all this stuff on your own. Why would you even try? Go to a room where you can learn from other people doing it.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So today, if you're listening to the podcast, as always, we always come up with great topics. Now, this is really cool working with Miranda. She, again, is our Director of Education. So we've got an incredible lineup, not only for today, but for future content. Our whole goal with this is to give you great information so that you create a better practice and better life. And today, we're going to be talking about the three metrics to measure new patient success. And I love this. I want you to start here. Tell us why this is so important.
Well, new patients are the bread and butter. Ultimately, they're what keeps our practice rolling. So if we don't have new patients coming in a steady influx, then we're not going to be successful in the end. And a really key piece of that is making sure that we're finding the right new patients for our practice. And really that's going to be, we measure our success around new patients. We're attracting new patients always. So what are we doing to make sure that we're making ourselves a place that someone would want to be as a patient? And then what are we doing as a team to make sure that when that patient walks through the door, it confirms that this is exactly where they're supposed to be. You're in the right place and this is why. And you have to be really intentional about that. And so when you're creating that experience or you're developing a new marketing plan and putting effort into, we talk a lot about how expensive it is to acquire new patients. You want to make sure that you're doing things right. And the only way to know if you're doing it right is to be able to measure the data around that new patient experience and then reflect on that data before you make decisions about changing anything in your path.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about some of those data points. And here's what's really important about new patients. Yes, new patients or new customers are important to any business. But now more than ever, you have to think better. People come up to me and go, I get 400 new patients a month. And I'm like, that sounds terrible. Secondly, I'll just say this out loud before we get started. Sometimes if your focus is new patients are the worst. You're like, where did this person come from? They didn't even know I was a real dentist. Like they just saw an ad somewhere. So you got to be careful because you're going to be committing time. It also frames the future of your practice. It also creates value for those people. So if we're all locked in on why we're doing this, what we're trying to attract, what measures matter, instead of the old, let's just get as many new ones in here as we can. Right?
I think that's what most people's plans are, honestly, is like, we should just get as many new patients as possible, right?
Right.
But if you haven't started exactly where you just said you need to start, which is the team aligning around what type of patients do we want in our practice? What type of dentistry do we want to do? How do we want to help people? What's going to happen once they show up?
Right.
Which path do we want them to go down? And what happens at each of those types of new patient appointments? How do we set ourselves apart? How do we wow people? You have to talk about all of those things before you just start looking at, let's get as many patients in the door as possible. Because what you might realize is I need 40 really awesome patients that are just right for what we want to do here. Right. I don't need 400 that maybe never even come back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And while this is one important piece, I'll just point to another data set. All of what we're talking about on the podcast is interrelated. We're going to be talking about new patient metrics, but let me go to the big picture. If you're a dentist listening to this, and I'm going to generalize, there's 331 million people in the United States. You don't need all of them in your practice. As a great restorative doc, you really only need 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 patients. The better you are, the less patients you need. And if your APV, annual patient value, is high enough, you can start to do the math and go, wow, I don't really need that many. And generalizing, again, if you have a full-time hygienist, about 750 is all they can see if you're seeing patients 2 times a year. So we want to have a clear mindset around what are we trying to do? And I'll just say this too. If you get this, you go, hey, listen, I only need 1,300 patients. They got to be the right patients. And over time, if I really create great relationships, you know who those 1,300 people refer? They were for people like the other 13, the other patients in the break. They go, I know you don't take my insurance. I got to pay full fee, right? And so you don't need everything.
Well, and another point that you just made around hygiene is if we start looking at the trends of hygiene, every 6 months is a little antiquated. Right. So many practices nowadays have more and more and more hygiene patients coming in every 3 months or every 4 months. I had patients when I was a hygienist that came in every 2 months if there was issues with dexterity or whatever it may be. So when we're customizing hygiene intervals now so much more than we have in the past, that number actually is even lower. Right. Because we are seeing those same people over and over more frequently. So as we shift from that 6-month recare interval that was just routine and we switch out of that routine mindset and into a customized mindset, even less really that we need in the hygiene chair to be successful.
Yeah. See, you as a listener, I'm delivering on a promise. I told you she was brilliant. She is. So,
well, and we're going to be talking at the administrative course tomorrow about that new patient phone call and how important it is and how important it is for your team to know how to handle and manage and guide the patients and really capture what their expectations are to make sure that we deliver on that when they come in for that first visit.
Yeah. And I could do a whole hour on that one. And why that is so important with what you just said is that if you really look at a sales process, it's all these touch points that add value. It's not you and your photos and what you say to a patient. I hope that your team members do such an amazing job on the phone of doing what you just said that they hang up and they go, this is going to be crazy expensive because she's good. She is so good.
But I can't wait to go.
but I can't wait to go. You would hope people don't hang up and go, man, this is going to be cheap,
Right.
No,
exactly. You want people to, I always compare it to real estate. My husband's in real estate, and you can show 4 houses on the same block, and there's one that had the yellow front door and the walk-in closet. And at the end of the day, they're all in the same block. They're all in the same school zone. There's the same general square footage. But that one had the yellow door and the walk-in closet. And you want your practice to be that when they get off the phone after they've called 3 or 4 people that showed up on their Google list of like dentists near me.
Yeah.
How do you set yourself apart?
That is so true.
Yeah.
The yellow door. Like it's so true. One of the houses we bought had a red front door. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
My wife was like, we got to have that house. She goes, I love the door. I'm like, we haven't even been inside. Well, the inside reflected the outside.
Yeah.
And it was one of our
But Amber answering your phone can be the yellow front door or the red front door if she's doing a really great job.
So well said.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go into a deeper dive on these metrics. Anything else on why this is important? Or should we just get into it?
I say we just get into it.
All right, let's go into the first one. One of the metrics you need to know in order to measure new patient success is new patient count. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. So we work a lot with dental intel with a lot of our clients in terms of the metrics. So some of what I'll talk about today is just how they define some of these numbers. But basically, your new patient count is defined as patients completing a first visit within your practice.
Right.
And so that number is very important to monitor, but I'm going to, as we go through this podcast today, it's not the most important number to monitor, and we'll talk a little bit more about why, but we have to start somewhere. And so one of the easiest metrics to manage is just how many new patients have, how many patients have completed a first visit via an ADA code within a certain time period, say per month, in our practice. And in dental intel, it's based on the first ADA code visit being posted. Some softwares are a little bit different. So it's just to note that if you have a different practice management software, you're not working with dental intel, you just need to understand your software and know how they track that number as a first visit. Some of them track it as you input someone as a new patient, regardless of whether or not they've completed a service. And so you would just have to be able to know where that metric stems from. But ultimately, it's pretty simple. It's just how many new patients are you seeing within a given time period? Yeah.
And you should have a goal.
Yes.
Ideally. So talk about that.
Well, that's a great question. There's no real benchmark for new patient count because every practice is so different.
Right.
Like you just said, some practices may only need 20 new patients a month. Some might need 5 new patients a month, and some need 500. It depends on the size of your practice. It depends on your hygiene reappointment rate. It depends on your pre-appointment rate. Are you trying to grow and support an associate? Or are you trying to slow down because you want to start cutting back? So there's no real benchmark, but you have to be strategic about it. It's not just as many as possible.
Yeah. And so shout out to John Cranham. And I don't know if he's still doing it this way, but one of the things that he said to me a long time ago is deeper thinking around this number. Because when you look at the mark of a truly successful restorative practice, it goes back to diagnostics. How many patients are you sitting down with on a daily basis that you're diagnosing, talking about something that you do and that matters to them? And so that's kind of where you have to backtrack from as you get into mature state. And he said this, he goes, even my career has changed, and I don't know how many days he's working now, but when I was working 18 days, I needed about 18 patients to speak to. When I got down to 15 days, it was like, and when I got to 13 days a month or 12, you can pretty much do the math. I got to be talking to 12 people a day. Not all of them are going to say yes. A handful of them are going to move forward. So that helped us see clearly about, and his team was all locked in on we need somebody to talk to. So if the patients were light coming in on the phone, that's when a hygienist would step in and go, okay, it's time. And the patient would go, time for what? Time for you to sit down with the doctor and revisit your goals. What does that mean? Well, let me tell you what that means. It's a comprehensive exam because we like to get a baseline. So they were pulling new patients from hygiene, which I thought was brilliant.
It's funny that you mentioned that because that is another factor that comes in. What's your diagnostic rate? If you need new patients, and I say need with air quotes for people who can't see me. If you need new patients to keep your schedule full, I would question, what's your diagnostic percentage of your existing patient base? And are we serving them? We put a lot of effort as practitioners into our new patient exams and into serving our new patients and identifying and diagnosing treatment, but are we serving our existing patients with that same fine eye?
Right.
Are we taking our time, or are we just catching up when we're popping in and doing our exams with our existing patients? So the less you're diagnosing and managing the oral health of your existing patients, the more new patients you're going to need or feel like you need because you don't have anything in your schedule.
Totally. Totally agree. Now, you have a couple guidelines on when the new patients should come in between phone call and whatever your new patient process is all about. Can you share those?
Yeah. So a tip I would have is you really want to make sure that you have a new patient in the practice within at least 2 weeks of the phone call. Now I think you have a higher sense of urgency than me.
Yeah, but you're smarter than I am, so it doesn't matter.
So I think Kirk likes to say around 7 days. So the ultimate story here is the sooner the better.
Right.
If somebody is calling, most of the time, I always say this, there's a trigger. When someone comes into the dental office, they're going through the buying cycle, just like a customer is on any other customer journey. And that always starts with awareness. And in dentistry, I'll often say, that's the person being out to dinner with their friends or family. And it's the third time that they've been out to dinner and haven't been able to order anything but soup off the menu. And they're frustrated because they're watching everyone else enjoy the meal, and they're having to be very cautious as they eat because they're trying to make sure that something doesn't hurt or something doesn't break or they're uncomfortable. And they really are finally just at that point where I'm calling tomorrow and I'm going to do something about this.
Yeah.
And that's when they move into that decision-making section of the buying cycle. Consideration. They have to consider what are the options, and that's what they're calling you for.
Yeah.
And that motivation goes away pretty quickly.
Yeah.
How long have they lived with that condition prior to this phone call? So if we can't get them in the office to start working towards a solution and offering hope sooner rather than later, they're either never going to come in or they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, this is so important. You're triggering a story. So when we lived in Kansas City, we had a house, and there was one person that everybody used. He's like the greatest painter ever. And he was a great guy, but he was super busy. Now, I'll never forget when I called him, he was there in like 3 hours. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got here in 3 hours? He's like, yeah, I look at all the metrics. I know that if I don't get to see somebody and just meet them, I'm not telling you I'm going to give you all the answers, but meet them in 24 hours, they call somewhere else. And so he had a crew doing all the work, and he's like, we're booked out it'll be 8 months before I'll be able to paint your house. But I was like, oh, I'm sold right away. And the point is the buying cycle type of a thing. And I would say this is that once you get outside the 2-week window, you're losing a significant number of patients, whether that be the follow through and actually showing up, but also the motivation to do something. And there's even a chance that people are like, well, that's like 3 weeks from now. I'll never forget. I went to a dentist. I won't tell you where they were, but they were a very, popular dentist. And she was so excited that it was 4.5 weeks to get a new patient appointment. And I'll never forget the look of the team. They're like, oh my gosh, this is like terrible. She doesn't know that half of them cancel. Do you know what I mean? And by the time we get them here, we work so hard to remotivate them. And so back to the 7-day thing, it doesn't always have to be 7 days. And it doesn't always have to be a comprehensive exam. But I think anybody listening to this would agree, if we can get them here and we can just meet them, they're going to stay, right? Don't you think, for the most part?
I do. And I really like the idea of a meet and greet visit. I encourage offices that I work with quite often to consider that as an option, because not everybody's ready right now. Right. A lot of times people are scared, anxious, nervous, fearful, or there's just a lack of understanding. Maybe it's been a while since they've been in, or maybe we are an out-of-network or fee-for-service provider and they don't know how that works. And so they're not ready to say yes to that comprehensive exam just yet. Or if we don't have the time just yet in our schedule, could we not see someone for 20 minutes, no charge, meet and greet, have someone on the administrative team available to show that person around, show them the office, say hi to people in the hallways, maybe go through and sit down and have a little consult, ask a few questions. They're going to remember that experience in a non-threatening way. Hey, guess what? If they don't show up, it didn't cost you anything. It wasn't a 2-hour block in your schedule and $495 you were expecting to get that day. And so I think it's a nice option to have as a new patient pathway of just a meet and greet. I worked in a practice for a while that called it a smile analysis. But I think it's also important to be really clear about the expectations, that it's 100%. Not going to be a clinical visit. We're not going to be looking in your mouth today. We just want to give you an opportunity to decide, is this a good fit for you? Yeah. Because we want to be the right fit for you when you're making this long-term decision, and you're automatically building that loyalty and long-term thinking into the decision for them.
I love what you just said, and I'll piggyback on that. One of the things to consider if you're listening to this is you also want to have a reputation of being easy to do business with. It's not like you got to jump through 32 hoops to come through here. That's one piece of it. And by doing this, you become a little bit easier. You don't You have your own rules, but it's very easy to do business. The second thing is, as you mature as a dental practice, an important piece of it is patient selection. You need to be connecting with the right type of patients. And in some cases, you just need a higher volume of, not like total volume, but a number of people to speak to go, not the ideal patient for us. I'm going to actually refer them out. But you need to have enough conversations that you can go, okay, of the 22 conversations we had this month, 11 of them were good for us. And that, when you start having patient selection, you can say, and you might do a meet and greet and go, this is a nice person. They're not ready for us, and maybe not, but we're going to send them back in the universe with great respect, and they may come back, you know, type of a thing.
Leave a positive experience, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And the other thing, when you just talked about making it easy, so another little bonus tip around new patient count and getting people in, new patients in within that reasonable amount of time, 7 days, 2 weeks, would be block scheduling and having blocks held and reserved in the schedule for new patients. And if you have 3 different pathways in which new patients join the practice, then we need blocks for all 3 pathways.
Yep.
And this is going to be based on the goals that you set for your practice in terms of how many new patients you need per month. We'll break that down per week. And then just make sure that you have an appropriate amount of blocks in your schedule so that if someone calls today, they can be seen within the next 2 weeks for that initial visit.
That's an entire podcast. I love that. We could open that up for like a half hour. We're going to come back to that one.
I would be happy to, because I'm obsessed with block scheduling, and anybody that's in my client repertoire would know that one of my soapboxes I say all the time. And then you have to honor the blocks, and then honor the blocks, and then don't forget that you have to honor the blocks, and like don't stop honoring the blocks.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that is that we love this stuff. Like we freak out on it. The nuances and the understanding and even the verbal skills around those, once you get that right, you're going to go, holy moly, that changed my whole day. We actually produce twice as much in a day. The mark of really fun stuff is when you experience more joy in the same amount of time. Do you know what I mean? And that might be financial. It might be...
to me, it's production, it's predictability and efficiency, and then having the availability for your patients.
Absolutely.
It serves you and them when you are intentional about what you're putting in your schedule.
Drop the mic.
Future podcast.
That's future podcast. So that's number 1. Let's go into the second metric to measure new patient success. What is it?
So that's new patient net growth. And I mentioned in the beginning that the new patient count to me is not the most important one.
Right.
So this one is to me much more important. So Dental Intel defines this as the number of new patients less or minus the patients that are lost. So what's a lost patient? So patients that are going inactive. Right. So what we know is in the industry, we consider 18 months inactive. If a patient hasn't been in the practice within the last 18 months for a visit, they're technically inactive. Now, sometimes patients are marked or considered lost in this equation if they are inactivated physically. You archive them, you mark them deceased or inactive. But also if they just haven't completed an appointment within the last 18 months, they would count in your lost category. So when you're looking at net growth, there's a couple of things you have to consider. There's really like an equation that goes into it, because we also have to think about, well, we're also recapturing people from that inactivated list or that lost list.
Right.
There's plenty of patients in our practice that haven't been in the last 18 months. Maybe they moved and now they've moved back, or maybe it's, since COVID, I don't know if we'll ever stop talking about COVID, a lot of people were delayed in returning into the dental office. And so we actually consider those recaptured patients in our new patient count. Okay. So when we look at that equation, we're looking at what's the new patient count. Let's add in however many patients we recaptured within our existing patient count. But now we have to subtract any patients that went out the back door that we lost, either due to being marked inactive or marked archived, marked deceased, or actually just haven't been in the office within the last 18 months. And then that's going to tell us our actual net new patient growth.
Yeah.
So, you think about it like this. Somebody shows up, to the study club meeting and you say, man, I'm really struggling to get new patients. I'm down to about, 20 a month. Oh, well, I get 100 new patients a month. Okay, but if that person has 150 new patients a month falling out the back door due to inactivity, they're actually in a negative, right? They're in a deficit for their new patient count. So this number to me is much more important than the count itself.
100%. It's not unusual for us to go back in the Dental Intel dashboard and you can see somebody with a super healthy number of new patients, but their gain was -9. And then the month before, negative 11, negative 22. You're like, wow, this is a dying practice.
But they feel really good. That happens a lot when I start coaching with clients, because until they get into dental, they're likely not tracking that number. Right. And so, we start talking about things within the practice, and I'm like, and I even think like, well, you get 30 new patients a month. That's pretty good. You're working 16 days a month. That's about 2 patients. That's great. You're doing great. But then when I start seeing what are we actually losing out the back door? Oh, hold on, wait a minute. Yeah. And then one of the first things we're going to talk about is, so what do we do? Right. What do we do if we're in that negative deficit with new patients? Yeah. And so, the tip there is you have to plug that leaky bucket. Yeah, you do. You do. And I love the holistic approach to how healthy your practice is. I mean, if you really, that's where we can go back to vision. But when you get a good idea of what you're building, now you can create countermeasures. You can start to see the new patients in more than just new patients type of a thing. Yeah, there's not one number that tells you if your practice is healthy or not.
100%.
We talk about production more often than not.
Right.
But that doesn't tell the whole story, because we know there's write-offs. And then what do we collective at? We might talk about the new patient count, but okay, what's our actual growth? And then how many of those, we're going to talk about in a minute, how many of those patients are coming back? Right. And then how much dentistry are we actually producing out of that? So you really have to look at all of those data points to really understand that full picture of health.
Right. And I'm going to go there because this is what we do, because UC practices come in really healthy number of new patients, but their net numbers way down, and we already make assumptions. Like when you have that many new patients coming in, and you're losing 10 to 11 to 12 to 30 patients a month, I can already tell you, I don't even need to know anything about the practice. The new patient experience is pretty poor. Mm-hmm. They're not they're not good at connecting with patients. Mm-hmm. The overall happiness of patients is probably mediocre.
And their administrative team is more often than not implementing follow-up systems.
Yeah. Probably pretty poor verbal skills. Mm-hmm. So these numbers tell us more than just what the numbers tell us. So there's always a story there. I love it.
And so if you do have, you need to plug that leaky bucket, there's a lot of resources and ways to do that. You got to systemize it, right, and you have to be consistent. But what's happening to all of those people? You say, some practices will say, I have 4,000 active patients. But if you actually go in and look at those dates, like they're marked as active, right? Because we haven't marked them inactive, but how many of them have actually physically been in the practice for a visit? Yeah. And so we have to talk, touch point with those people. We have to reach out. We have to connect with them. We need follow-up connection systems so that we can make sure that we're trying to, build them into that recapture number so that we can start building the growth rate and get back up into the positive.
I love it. So that's number 2. Let's talk about number 3, the third metric to measure new patient success. What is it?
So that's the new patient hygiene reappointment rate. And I'm going to highlight the word hygiene. Okay. So when we're looking at how many of those new patients that we saw actually scheduled for a next visit, really importantly, how many scheduled for their next hygiene visit. And so what we know is hygiene is where the loyalty is built in a practice. Because if a new patient comes in and a tooth is bothering them and we fix that tooth, they've scheduled for the next visit, but are they ever coming back? Because now we solve their problem, or the only perceived problem that they know that they had. And so if we take our time through that comprehensive exam to really build value also in the long-term plan, and we make sure that we have them reappointed for hygiene, that's going to tell us how successful our new patient experience is. And I can have 100 new patients in my count. I could have 50 new patients in my growth, but ultimately, if those patients never return, none of that matters.
Yeah, I love this. And I think this is one of those metrics that if you're a dentist, taking some fresh lenses and revisiting what really is hygiene. Well, everybody has their definition. I love yours. And then when you think about the uniqueness of a dental practice, think about this. It's one of the few businesses in the world that it's a built-in sales cycle. Like, what if I had a restaurant and I required everybody to come on certain days that they just had to come back? Like, you have people coming back. Why wouldn't you want that to be crazy healthy? And all you do, I don't want to say set it and forget it, but let's get it right and improve it. And now you've got a built-in sales system. You are not waking up every day making cold calls to everyone in your community going, hey, you want to get your teeth cleaned today? You want to come on in? Do you need any dentistry? Just thought I'd check. You know, if you do this right, you can just show up and customers are coming in every day going, hey, what's going on? Type of a thing. It's brilliant.
Well, and what you just said is the key is if you do it right.
Right.
It's so much about the language that we use in the office and the alignment that we have as a team and how we build value. It's not just a cleaning. You know, what are they really coming back for?
She said it, Andy. She said just.
I thought you were going to say cleaning.
No, we just shot a video yesterday on the whole, like, don't use language like just, which is a whole nother podcast. But
yeah, minimizing language. If it's just a cleaning, they're also more likely to cancel it because, I mean, it's just a cleaning.
Well,
right?
And it's just me calling. And it's just me calling, and it's just a reminder, which means I'm not very important, and what I'm calling about isn't important either. And so I don't know, I'm kind of bugging you a little bit, or maybe I'm not, you know, so I don't know. So
I look forward to that video. Andy.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have a whole other thing, but your language matters.
It does.
Choice of words.
The way that you represent what your office is about. Like patients, when they're there for their first visit, they're learning what you're all about.
Right.
You know, and it's important for you to share it with them. Have your core values around the office, your practice promises. We talk our clients who we coach through like differentiation, and they come up with practice promises and how they're going to treat their patients and what we do differently here. Like talk about that. Yeah. You know, make sure that when they're there, they know what's important to you and that what's important to you is them.
She just said the magic word that you replace the word just with. You replace just with important. Instead of saying it's just a cleaning, say this is an important reminder about this very important appointment. Think about this. You and I go to a restaurant with Andy and all the other coaches, and the waiter comes up and goes, yeah, it's just a piece of meat. We cook it, you know. You want it? No. But what if I said it's a very important selection process, and what we do is very specific? Like I'm like, 2, please. You know, so yeah. I think we create a lot of value from specific language, and that's why this stuff is so fun. Now, I want you to go a little bit deeper on the reappointment percentage. So let's go. Let's open that one up.
Well, one of the things you have to think about is if they're coming in to the office for restorative needs primarily. Okay. Right. So we talked about the buying cycle earlier and awareness. And a lot of times awareness isn't that they think they need a hygiene visit. Although sometimes you have someone who says they're due for hygiene. I'll give them that. Right. But a lot of times it's something's bothering them. Something's going on. I think I need to ground. My tooth hurts. Right. So if we only speak to that need and we don't build that comprehensive conversation into the room, then we're going to schedule them for the crown or the filling or whatever it is that restoratively meets their needs. Right. But what we need to also do is schedule that next visit. Yes. So yes, patient, I hear what you're saying and I want to help you and we're going to help you. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to go one step beyond that. We're going to help you with this problem, but we're going to help you prevent any future problems by going ahead and reserving an appointment with one of our oral health specialists, our hygienist, Jane. She's going to look forward to seeing you. Let's go ahead and reserve that as well. We can do that 2 weeks after we finish our restorative appointment, so you have time to make sure you're comfortable. And then great news, I can actually look at it when you come in for that visit and just give you some peace of mind that everything's A-okay.
Okay, Miranda's dropping gold here. I think you should hit the rewind on that part of the podcast and just write out what you just said, because that's so powerful how you said that and so confidently. And I think that the important piece here is you're going to set it up. You're setting the patient up for success. A lot of times patients don't know why they're calling. They're thinking, I just got to get my teeth cleaned or I have a problem a lot of times. And you, as an administrator, a really good one, can say, okay, this is an incredible new patient. I'm going to connect with them and I'm going to address your needs. We're going to take great care of you. And before you hang up, we're going to make a different appointment, whatever that is. And I like the idea of what you just said. Here's what you're doing. You're tethering them to the practice, because if you don't do what Miranda said, here's what a lot of people do. They call because they have a dental need, and then you put them through a comprehensive exam. It's 2 hours long. It's $495, and our doctor's going to do photos, x-rays, all that kind of stuff. Our doctor's been trained at the very highest level. We will impress you. And then we'll have you back for a conference. You know, I'm having fun with you guys. Now, I think you should do that. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But here's what a lot of people miss is they do an amazing job with all of that. They do a very comprehensive exam. They do an incredible job. And the treatment plan is $12,000. And you pause, you do all of your case presentation skills that you've been taught, and the patient's just not ready to say yes. They're like, wow, they're really good, but that's a lot of dough. I don't have the money. I didn't think this was going to be $12,000. And here's what you do. You go, oh, that was a great patient. Do you have any questions? No. And then they leave. And then you tell Sally at the front, stalk her. And so Sally stalks her and calls her and leaves another message and leaves another message and another message saying, we got to get you back. You got to get you back. And they're like, delete, 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 delete. And you lost a great patient that could have been ready at some point. They just weren't ready to hear that yet. The cool thing about making 2 different appointments is we don't have to pressure anybody. Whenever they're ready, they're ready. But I'm still going to keep this patient in the schedule because they're tethered with the hygiene appointment. Am I in the right track here or not?
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say too, is, we're putting all this effort and focus and intentionality on this first visit.
Right.
But we need to do that looking forward into the future as well. We need to have, okay, and then what do we do at the end of that? Here's our checklist. At the end, the last thing in the checklist is, and if there were a way for us to make sure that we would you like to do that patient? Great. Let's go ahead and set up another appointment. I think if you're thinking long-term, if you're thinking about this as, the long game and not just sealing the deal on this new patient comprehensive exam, I have to get this much production out of this, this new patient exam. I was just talking with someone about this the other day and how a lot of us have worked in practices where you can see the patient just has a $sign over their head, and you don't want to work for a provider that sees patients in that way.
Right.
But sometimes you feel like you have to. You feel kind of trapped by like, I gotta close this one.
Yeah.
But what comes is that production in the long run. If you're playing the long game.
Yeah.
And if you're looking ahead into the future and not just one new comprehensive patient at a time, but the lifetime of that patient in your practice.
Yeah.
And it starts with being forward focused, and you don't want to pressure them so hard in the beginning that they're like, now I'm a little skeptical.
Yeah.
That felt like a little bit like a sales pitch. No, you're building a relationship with that patient. And that's the most important thing that you do at the first visit. And part of that is inviting them back.
Yeah.
Invite them back. When someone comes to your house for the first time and you introduce them to your family and you show them around and you guys hang out and you have a great dinner and you have a great time, what do you do?
Yeah.
I'd love for you to come back sometime.
Absolutely.
When do you want to come back? Actually, let's just look at our schedules, because Lord knows if we don't schedule it now, we're never going to see each other till next year. Let's just do it. I mean, you do it with your friends, you do it for social gatherings. And that's what you're doing, is you're building a relationship with these people. So you have to be looking at the long game.
100%. And if you're listening to this podcast, that's another gold nugget that Miranda just dropped, is I love the long game versus the short game. And Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm a big fan of, not his language, but his thoughts, is that he said, you know what, most people, if you changed your thinking that you were building a business for 100 years and really caring about your customers, you would do it differently. You would do it right. You would ultimately be wildly successful. If you thought, now I'm not asking you to work for 100 years, but if you thought like, I'm going to build this practice for 100 years, it would be so powerful. All too often, entrepreneurs think the short game, which is I just got to figure out how to make some money and serve people and do right. And you're right. When you do the long game, there's no $signs on people's foreheads, I
think about it in hygiene often too, and this is a little squirrel, so I'll try not to go too far down this path, but hygienists will ask, okay, well, I have, 90 minutes for my new patient exam. Or let's take it back even to 60 minutes. I have a patient, a recaptured patient, someone who hasn't been into the office in the last 2 years, and they're back, and I have 60 minutes. But they need perio. I know they need perio, but I have 60 minutes. So what do I do? Well, what if you took that time not doing hygiene services that day? Now, mind you, they'd have to be set up with that expectation on the phone call,
right,
that we would be diagnosing and determining if we would be doing hygiene services that day or not, so that they're not disappointed. But what if we didn't do hygiene services that day? Because that's really not what they need. They don't need a prophy. And we know that. We've just diagnosed that there's something else going on here. And we use that time for OHI.
Right.
We use that time for some motivational interviewing to help that patient get on board with building value around periodontal therapy,
right, or
possibly adjunct therapy that we might include in that as well. Now, what I hear doctors say is, well, now we're losing that production. But you're getting 4 or 5 times that production because they're going to say yes
100%
to the periodontal therapy. And guess what? Now they're coming in every 3 months post periodontal therapy for periodontal maintenance, which is also a higher production appointment than a prophy. And so it's the long game mindset. versus what can I get today? I need it today.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Now I want to go back to new patient hygiene reappointment percentage. Do you have a target? Like just general ballpark, healthy percentage. If I'm a administrative team member or a doctor, like where should my percentages be?
I would generally coach teams to try to be at 75% or above.
Okay, good target.
You know, I think that it's unrealistic to think that everybody's come back. And the other thing that you need to think about is taking out of the equation or taking into consideration in the equation that sometimes you're covering for a dentist down the street.
Right.
And somebody came in and they were a new patient last month, but really they're never coming back. You were just doing an emergency visit maybe for, Dr. Awesome who's down the block while he's on vacation.
Right.
Or perhaps someone, I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It's a tourist town. And in the summers, people fall and they break a tooth or they have a toothache and they're never coming back. They live in Ohio. Right. So you have to look at that new patient list and really make sure that it's accurate as well. But yeah, I think 75%, I think 100 is unrealistic. And I think anything less than that, we're probably missing the mark somewhere within our experience. What I find in my teams that do it really, really well is usually the high 80s.
Yeah.
That's when they're really crushing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then bonus tip number 2, I want you to go into that because you taught me this and I wasn't thinking of this. This appointment in hygiene is important because sometimes people won't go into the comprehensive exam. You're going to have to refer them out. Talk about that.
Yeah, sometimes when people come in for their comprehensive exam, or if you take new patients into the practice as emergencies or same day type treatment, you might be referring them. Right. You might be referring them to an endodontist or an oral surgeon or a periodontist. But that doesn't mean we can't schedule them for hygiene.
100%.
So it's still important to, like you said, tether them to the practice, and that's through that hygiene reappointment. And so we can say to the patient, this is an emergent situation, and we see that, and we're going to help you get out of pain. That's the most important thing to us because I can see that's really what you need and what you want. Great, let's do that. We're going to send you to go see Dr. Jones down the street, and she's going to take amazing care of you. I'm going to let her know you're coming. What I would like to do, though, is help prevent you from having a situation like this again. So why don't we do this? About a month from now, just to give you time to get in with Dr. Jones and see what's going on and get out of discomfort, let's have you back in to see the hygienist. And when you're in for that visit, we can do a comprehensive exam because I want to make sure that you never end up in this situation again.
Bam. I don't even know what to say. Like, that's another incredible nugget. I actually have this idea. My brain is exploding. Andy, we're going to do a segment on the podcast called The Most Difficult Discussions.
Can we do role playing?
Yeah,
role playing is one of my favorite things to do.
This is exactly what we're going to do. So if you're listening, please email me the most difficult things you've ever received. Now, this will be so fun because you won't even know what I'm going to ask you.
Nope.
I'm going to pretend to be a patient on the other end. And I'm going to throw you bomb after bomb after bomb. And we're just going to see how she reacts.
You have no idea how much joy that would bring me.
Oh my gosh, that is a whole entire segment. So if you're listening.
I challenge you to stump me.
Game on. All right. This is actually going to become a game show in somehow. Ding, 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 ding. And I challenge you as a listener, if you're a dentist listening to this, and you give me a question or a scenario that you've received in a recent day at work, send it to me. And if we stump her, I'll send you a $50 gift card to your favorite fast food. I don't know. Yeah, we'll come up with something, but I'll create a financial incentive for you to give me the biggest problem you have.
You get a golden ticket and you get a golden ticket.
Yeah. And see if Miranda can solve it because you have a lot of gifts, but one of the gifts you have is to be able to think and discern through a lot of like crazy questions and make them positive. Like I could throw you a bomb and I might hang up with you on the phone and go, she was so nice. Like I was so mad when I started that phone call and now I feel great, but that would be a great segment.
I'll tell you, it comes from years and years and years of talking to patients.
Oh my gosh. All right. We got to stay focused because you have a class to teach. And we got to have a brewski after this just to celebrate. So I want you to give our listeners a couple final takeaways on 3 metrics to measure new patient success.
Okay. Well, I'd say the first takeaway I'd like you to have is like the right number of new patients isn't as many as possible.
Okay. Are you sure?
I'm sure. 100% confident. So I would say you need to look at the whole practice as a whole. You need to look at your current active patient size. You mentioned earlier, based on full-time provider, 1,200 to 1,500 is an appropriate number. That's generally a healthy practice.
Right.
So if you're a single doctor practice and he's a full-time provider, and you already have 1,600 patients, you don't need as many new patients as a startup who maybe only has 700.
Yeah, but you're going to have to say that to me like 7 times, because even though I know that, I'm still going to be trying, right? Because you do this all day long.
Yes, you are still going to be trying. But what you would need to think about is the other numbers that come along with it.
Right.
So you're going to be looking at your pre-appointment percentage, how many of your existing active patients, people who have been in the office in the last 18 months, this is a number we didn't talk about, but how many of those patients are pre-appointed for something?
Right.
You know? So they're active patients if they've been in the practice for the last within the last 18 months. But I really consider them active.
Yes.
If they're also currently pre-appointed for something. So let me put numbers on that. If you have 1,000 active patients, right? In the last 18 months, 1,000 patients have been through my door.
Right.
Okay. But only 600 of those patients currently are pre-appointed for something in our office.
Right.
So I have 400 patients that are active technically, but how active are they if they're currently not tethered, the word that you used earlier, tethered in some way?
Right.
And so we have to be looking at that number too, because yes, I have 1,000 active patients. I probably need at least 200 to 500 more to really feel like I'm supporting my full-time position. But how many of those don't even have anything scheduled in your office right now?
Right. And if you're a dental intel user, that would be pre-appointment percentage. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And again, targets for that. I mean, you gave us some numbers, but like
pre-appointment percentage, I mean, 65 to 70% of your active patients, I think the higher the better, obviously. Right. But so that goes into follow-up systems. So we're going to be talking a lot at the administrative course about follow-up systems, and I'm hoping to put something together that maybe will be a resource we can add on at some point. But follow-up systems are really important. What are we doing to stay in touch with those people? So we have to look at our active patient count. How many of them are pre-appointed for something? Even better if they're pre-appointed for hygiene. So we have our hygiene reappointment rate.
Right.
So we talked about a new patient hygiene reappointment rate, but what about your existing patients? To me, that needs to be in the high 90s.
Right.
That when patients come in for a hygiene visit, they're reappointed for their next visit before they leave that day.
Totally agree.
And so those numbers like that, looking at the big picture, are going to help you to say, I have a really healthy practice. I'm doing really well. Or, you know what? I need to build this practice. I'm going to need to build my new patient count.
Yeah.
And so the takeaway is you don't need as many patients as you can get. You need the right number of patients for what you're trying to do, which ultimately goes back to your vision. And what are you trying to create for your practice?
Right.
If you're trying to grow and you want another location and you want an associate and you're going to be hiring, another you're going to need more patients.
Yeah.
But if you're just trying to run your practice to the best of your ability, creating an elevated experience, we can just stay stable. So let's look at how many patients are going out the back door.
Right.
How can we plug that leaky bucket, slim that down, and then consistently have a trend of what that looks like. And now we know how many we're going to need to bring in each week or each month in order to support staying exactly where we are. Just depends on if you're growing or stabilizing.
Yeah, that's why this is so good. And there's a couple things, there's so many things I think about. Like data is not emotional. So it tells, you can just look at data and it tells you everything. The other thing I would say about data is that there's a story. So if we took any practice and just put a couple numbers in here, I go, well, there's a problem with this. And again, I don't need to know the size of the practice. I don't even need to know where the practice is at. I can tell you there's a couple things going on because the data is so conclusive. Mm-hmm. Now, it isn't always the case, but it does lend itself to a bigger story. And then the other thing I think about when you're looking at data like this is where you as an entrepreneur can transition your focus on numbers from being about dollars to these are data points. They have nothing to do with money and everything to do with money. So if I'm working on hygiene reappointment percentage, new patient count, new patient net growth, pre-appointment percentage, I can promise you those numbers get healthier, the money goes through the roof. That's when it's the byproduct, don't you think?
Absolutely. And what we're able to talk about with our teams, because you need your team support to make these numbers happen, is this isn't just about a dollar.
Right.
Because they don't want to hear numbers that are just about dollars, because that starts to feel a little icky. For most healthcare providers, most of your auxiliary team members are there to take care of people.
Yep.
And it's not their business, ultimately. They don't own it. They're not there till the end, more than likely. And so you're going to always be concerned about dollars, and you should be. But if the conversation always turns to dollars when we're talking about data points with our team, it can be a deterrent.
Yes.
But if we can take those data points and keep them exactly that, they're simply numbers that we're watching go up and down. And then you can take that and correlate it into the experience that you're providing for the patient.
Yeah.
And so when these numbers go up, that means more and more of our patients are being served in a better way.
Yeah.
They're getting healthier, right? They're happier. We're doing a better job of making them feel comfortable and cared for here. And so that's going to motivate your team more than, and our production went up by $10,000.
I love it.
You know, they need to know that experience that they're creating with the patients is changing the patients' lives in a positive way. Because that's what, I'm a hygienist at heart. And I have been for 20 years. I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to learn a valuable skill, a valuable trade that I could take out into the world and help someone.
Yeah.
And so if you know that when that number goes up, it means we helped more people. We made more relationships. We made a bigger impact. We built more value. The dollars come in the end and you don't even have to talk about them.
Amen. That was awesome. Awesome. Now, if you're listening to the podcast, I hope you enjoyed that. And a couple things. You might be thinking, gosh, this is overwhelming. It's a lot to consider. Don't try to figure this out on your own. We're happy to help you. So we have an amazing full-time therapist on our team. Her name is Gina. I like to affectionately refer to her. She does a lot of listening. Like at the very least, you're going to meet an incredible person that really likes to listen, learn your story, and just point you in the right direction. If it ends up being coaching, great. It might be just hanging out with us and to the top, but don't struggle on your own. We also have the fall admin course. I just wanted you to do one more shout out for that. You have another course just like this. We offer it how many times a year?
2 times a year.
2 times a year. And so the second one will be in the, do you know the dates? No? Don't worry. We'll put them.
Not off the top of my head.
We'll put them in the show notes. That's what's so cool about it.
It's in September. Maybe around the 12th.
Yeah. Maybe around the 12th. And then we have additional handout. It's called Creating a 6-Star Experience. And if you click the link, you can go right to it to learn more about how to improve the overall new patient experience so that it's truly remarkable.
Yep.
So
that's a tool that's housed in our BPA resources folder. So
BPA on the way. We'll talk about that. We came up with a great idea, but more great stuff coming your way, like Stump Miranda. BPA on your way, and then, I don't know, it's all good stuff. I love doing this. This is crazy. I hope you guys stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this podcast. Our job here is to bring you great information to help you think better, create a better practice, a better life. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed today, which I know you did, just hit the share button, share it with your friends. Keep sending us suggestions that you want for the show and things we can stump Miranda with, and we'll keep bringing it. So until we see you guys next time or you hear from us next time, keep watching or keep listening to the Best Practices Show. Guys, enjoy your day.